It's October and it's time to break out your favorite scary movie. Bringing it back to the first video I ever did when I started my YouTube journey, and keeping with tradition because...
Stick with tradition?
Well, you don't fuck with tradition.
It's time to deep dive into my favorite time of year. And despite having your favorites, if you're looking for something different, or maybe just some different options, this is a good place to start. I bring you 31 horror movie gems you might not know about.
This is so exciting.
Now, you might know some of these, but I like to highlight the movies I feel fall below the radar. The unsung heroes. The horror gems that deserve a chance, or even a second chance.
Things ain't what they used to be.
Also, these are in no particular order.
Oh boy, this is gonna be good, I can tell.
We're gonna kick it off with a subgenre I love, the found footage genre, with Resurrected from last year. I came across this film on Tubi, and it's sort of a sleeper agent among the low-budget found footage films that you can find out there. It tells the story of how the church has figured out how to resurrect people. It opens on a tragic event of one family whose son is killed in a car accident. The church brings him back to life as the first resurrected person. The boy's father is blamed for his death, so his wife divorces him, despite the fact that the son comes back. The film then time jumps into the future, where the church has a strong hold on the world, stating if you want to be considered for resurrection, you must follow the church and commit no sins. The boy's father has become a priest at this point, and he oversees his flock, which are a group of resurrected people, and he's there to assure they assimilate back into normal life. He then discovers there's a conspiracy in the church, and they're trying to hide it. This is all told through the webcam of his laptop, security camera footage, and news reports. The story is different and it's unique. With a bigger budget, I could see this being something that went into theaters, but it's still worth a sit through. I'm jumping generations here with Screamers from 1995. This is an all-time favorite of mine when I was younger, and I don't know how many people these days have heard of it. Screamers takes place in the year 2078, and humans have colonized other planets. The plot revolves around a civil war between two factions on a planet called Sirius 6b. Scientists for one faction create robots to help kill the opposing side called Screamers, machines meant to kill living beings that get their name from the sound they deploy upon attack. The robots, of course, become sentient and can't be controlled. A commander for a mercenary team is told of a possible truce, but doesn't fully believe it and thinks they were left to wage war and die alone on this planet. He goes on a mission to find a way back to Earth while trying to avoid the wasteland where the Screamers can be found. He discovers the Screamers have evolved into 3 different types: the initial design, the Type 3, which is a child looking for shelter, and the Type 2, yet to be discovered.
What was so goddamn important that you couldn't come back with the rest of us?
What other type? Pulled us off with David, it said Type 3. Pulled us off the reptile, it said Type 1. Now what other type?
Since the Screamers can take the shape of humans, they worry their little group is holding a creation that looks to kill them. It is pure 90s sci-fi and worth returning to for just the nostalgia. It's based on a short story called Second Variety, written by Philip K. Dick, the same man who wrote Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which was the inspiration behind Blade Runner from 1982. There is a sequel, but I've never seen it, so I can't speak to it. Also, Peter Weller. Where can you go wrong? This is a Netflix original, Aftermath from 2021. I believe this got some hype when it came out, but then quickly drifted into forgetfulness. It opens on Sean Ashmore playing Kevin, who works as part of a forensic cleanup crew where they're working in a house that a body of a man who killed himself is found. The house itself is gorgeous, but now tainted with a death on the premises. Kevin is worried his relationship is failing, and he knows this house is fantastic, but way out of their means, so he takes advantage of the chance at purchasing it for him and his wife, because the death has lowered its value. Shortly after moving in, they learn soon they got more than just a bargain. It can feel like a slow burn, but the payoff is wild. It has its cliche moments for a movie with this premise, but I still think it's worth it. I believe this one was recommended in the comments on last year's video, Inner Demons from 2014. Thanks to whoever gave it to me. It's another low-budget found footage film, but what I like about it is that it takes the Grave Encounters approach, a reality show in the same realm of intervention. A crew show up to the home of Carson, a teenager who went from a bright young woman into a drug addict in such a short period of time. Her family called the show to get help. They document the home and eventually take her to a facility to get treatment. It is there you discover that the girl is doing the drugs to subdue the demon possessing her. And the only one trying to help her is one of the camera guys on the crew. The story kind of feels half nonsense, but it's also half awesome in my opinion. The idea of subduing a possession with hard drugs is such an interesting take on that idea, and I don't think I've ever seen it before. But the whole obsession the cameraman has with helping her is a bit overdone for the film. Then again, you probably need it because for the found footage aspect to work, it just wouldn't make sense if he wasn't obsessed. All in all, it's worth looking into. This one comes up a lot when you're talking about horror movie gems. Lake Mungo from 2008. This film did its runs through a bunch of film festivals before it would land on Prime and Tubi. You might think it's a found footage, but actually, it's more than likely one of the purest forms of the mockumentary style filmmaking, at least that I've ever seen before. It's something called docufiction, which I didn't know was a thing before I saw this movie. It is presented like a 60-minute special edition news program, chronicling the events leading up to the unexpected disappearance of Alice Palmer and her family's road to finding out what happened to her and the events that led up to the last time she was seen. There are so many twists and turns as the story progresses, and you jump around with what you think happened, but after a while you stop making guesses, because no matter what, you're wrong. I'm not going to go into any of the details of the film itself because it's so unique and it really is a triumph in found footage that you should watch it yourself. It's one of the few video-on-demand films I know of that sits with such high ratings on networks like Rotten Tomatoes. Watch this film if you've never seen it before. I guarantee you, you won't regret it. We're going to stay in the same year with The Midnight Meat Train. I think most fans of Clive Barker know of this film. Barker is a legendary writer, director, and artist in the horror world. This film is based on one of his short stories in Books of Blood, released in 1984. It stars Bradley Cooper, Vinnie Jones, Brooke Shields, and Leslie Bibb. It was meant for a theoretical release, but got delayed and pushed to DVD. Barker didn't like that so much, and it started a bit of a hatred he had with Lionsgate and the then president Joe Drake. The film is about a photographer who is trying to make his art more appealing by taking risks. He decides to track down a known serial killer called the Subway Butcher, who kills his victims at night when the trains are almost empty. As he gets too close, he begins to unravel a more sinister secret hiding in the tunnels. That's all I can really give you, because anything else would ruin a good Clive Barker climax, and us fans of his work and most of his films know it's worth it in the end. We're gonna have a couple of Netflix originals on this, and this is another one from 2015, Hidden. Like Aftermath, this probably got a lot of attention when it first came out, but it seems to have disappeared from the conversation in the years following. It's also the only feature-length film written and directed by the Duffer Brothers, the same guys who created Stranger Things. It follows a family who hide out in a bunker after the world collapses from an outbreak. You don't find out exactly what happens until the end, as it's told from flashbacks as well as through the story's progression. But the family do their best to keep their spirits up while avoiding the monsters on the surface. It has probably one of the most unexpected twists I had seen in a long time. It was so good, it would probably make M. Night Shyamalan himself blush. Let's keep it going with Host from 2020. Imagine it's peak pandemic, and we're all locked inside, learning how to cope with the only form of communication we have, video conferencing. If you weren't exposed to it beforehand, you learned quickly how to use Zoom or Teams or something. Director Rob Savage made a short video as a prank regarding an incident happening during a Zoom call. It went viral, so Savage turned it into a film. Coming in at not much longer than an hour, the film tells the story of a group of friends that get together on a Zoom call to have a virtual seance, where they unfortunately call an entity that begins to haunt them all. On paper, this sounds lackluster, but the film sits on a lot of great reviews. It is surprisingly good despite how boring its premise may sound. And the entire film is recorded from the Zoom sessions themselves, so there is a slightly heightened sense of realism to it as well. Next up, The Invitation. This 2015 thriller is a slow-burning Cuban cigar, where you enjoy every bit of it as it goes down, following the story of Will and his new girlfriend Kira as they are invited to a dinner party at his ex-wife's home, which was once his home, and now she lives there with a new husband. Other friends join the party, and there is a lot of dialogue showing them catching up on everyone's life. Will begins to notice weird things as he wanders around his home, remembering his past life. You learn that he and his ex-wife divorced after the death of their son, and she was roped into a cult-like group to help her deal with her grief, where she met her new husband. Another member of this group arrives, and Will begins to grow more and more suspicious of why everyone is there, and essentially what this entire party is all about. The third act of this film is absolute bananas. You can find it on Tubi, and you should go find it right now. Here's an interesting Vincent D'Onofrio film from 2012, Chained, a psychological thriller where he plays Bob, a fake cab driver who goes out and kidnaps women to bring back to his isolated home to kill them. The film opens onto him grabbing a mother and her child, but he keeps the child as his sort of ward, nicknaming him Rabbit. The years go on as Rabbit is chained to a cot in the kitchen like an animal, as he watches Bob bring home women to murder for almost a decade. You see Bob try to have a relationship with Rabbit, treating him as if he was his own son, and plans to make him do what he does in his place. There is a slight twist to the ending that I won't spoil, but you can't go wrong with this film. Writer and director Jennifer Lynch had a lot of difficulty getting the film released due to it being given an NC-17 rating beforehand. She went through a big battle with the MPAA, but caved and cut what she needed to for it to get its R rating and be released. If that name doesn't sound familiar, this is the daughter of iconic writer and director David Lynch. Unfortunately, this hassle might have been her downfall because it is the last full-length feature film she's done. She put it all on the line for this film, and now you can find it anywhere, and you definitely should. Now, let's do a foreign film, Raw from 2016. This might not be the biggest surprise to a lot who really go digging for the good horror movies. But this feels like it might fall off some people's radar because not many people give foreign films a chance. This is a French body horror film, body horror being the type of film that will show some really brutal things happening to a person's body. It follows Justine as a first-year veterinary student, attending the school her older sister is in and where her parents met for the first time. Justine is also a vegetarian. The school itself has a traditional hazing ritual where the freshmen are bathed in blood and forced to eat rabbit kidneys. Justine tries to refuse, but her sister forces her to do it. She then develops a craving for meat, which leads her down a darker path of her own self-discovery. This film won 10 awards at various film festivals and sits on some tremendous ratings, so it's not just me telling you it's worth it. This next one might be a little divisive. Sleepwalkers from 1992. Is it the best reviewed film? No. But what it is to the horror world is the first film written by Stephen King as a fresh story. This is not based on any of King's previous work. The plot revolves around a son and mother who are the last two of a species referred to as, okay, give me a second, shape-shifting energy vampires that can transform into human-sized bipedal werecats. Okay, that's a lot to take in, but even more interesting is that they feed off the life force of virgin women. So the story is about the son, Charles, in search for his next meal, and he chooses a classmate, Tanya. While trying to feed, she breaks away and he gets hurt. His mother knows he needs to feed now more than ever. I don't want to ruin the third act even though this film is 32 years old. It did a short theater run and was forgotten about because not many people like it. Heck, I find it hard to find people other than myself that like it. And that's understandable, because shape-shifting energy vampires that can transform into bipedal werecats is a lot. But for any Stephen King fan, you appreciate his work, and this has a special place in my heart. Let's bring it a bit more recently with You'll Never Find Me from 2023. Coming out of Australia, this is a single-room horror film that focuses a lot on dialogue, perception, and misdirection. Patrick is a man who lives quietly in his mobile home. On a stormy night, he is visited by a young woman who is looking for help. As he is seemingly trying to help her, it does come off awkward, but also suspicious of the girl, as it is late at night, it's pouring rain, and she's barefoot. He continues to offer her help as she reluctantly accepts while they converse about general life lessons, which hold more meaning as the plot progresses. You never know who to trust one way or another, because your gut is telling you that the girl is in trouble and why doesn't she just run? But then Patrick's actions make it seem like nothing is wrong. And every time something comes up, you're dragged back and forth between who as the viewer you are actually rooting for. The entire third act is insane. The turn this film takes comes out of nowhere and it's amazing. Some can find it slow, but it's a slow that's worth it for the payoff. Here's another one from across the Atlantic, Censor from 2021. Shout out to Nabtira Renton for this awesome rendition of the trailer in 80s fashion. I was looking up the trailer and I had to use this one, so kudos to you guys. This came out fantastic. It is a British psychological horror film written and directed by Prano Bailey Bond, as the only full-length film she's ever done. The film follows Enid, who works for the British Board of Film Classification. This is basically the team that gives the ratings for films and determines if cuts need to be made to hit certain rating marks. It takes place in 1985, during the height of the video nasty controversy, which was the movement regarding censorship in low-budget films. Though this premise alone is interesting, the film focuses on Enid discovering a film with an actress that closely resembles her sister who went missing 20 years prior. She then goes on a hunt to find the film's maker so she can find this girl and prove it really is her sister, because she's never given up hope. On her journey, she discovers some cruel parts of that film world while also discovering a lot about herself. Does that sound cryptic? Because it's supposed to. I'm not spoiling shit. Go find this, watch it however you need to watch it, see what other positive reviews are talking about. It's totally worth it. Now here's a film that went into theaters, Come Play from 2020. It was not financially successful, nor does it have the greatest ratings, yet I feel compelled to praise it regardless of this, and think most have forgotten it simply because most did not like it. But I find it to be a very enjoyable film. It tells the story of Oliver, an 8-year-old nonverbal autistic boy who struggles with making friends and relies heavily on his tablet and smartphone to communicate. One night he finds this mysterious app on his tablet that he opens to discover it tells the story of somebody called Larry, a monster that just wants a friend. While he doesn't let the story finish at that moment, the movie's progression tells us more about Larry and what he actually wants. Essentially, Larry is the manifestation of loneliness, created in the digital world from people who use their devices to escape reality, because they themselves are lonely. Larry, in turn, is lonely because that's all he knows. and now he wants to bring a friend into the digital world with him, and that friend he wants is Oliver. This premise, to me at least, is incredibly unique as not only a storytelling point, but also being different than your typical haunting spirit monster trope. Perhaps a few things could have been done better, but it's still worth it as a discussion piece. Keeping it going with Unsane from 2018. This made its rounds in the horror community at the time it was released, but it doesn't get enough people talking about it in my opinion. Sawyer left her home because of a stalker, but she finds herself traumatized by the events that she simply can't move on. After speaking with a therapist, they trick her into signing a release form for a 24-hour psychiatric hold in a mental facility. Against her will, they hold her there for the insurance money. But while that in and of itself is unsettling, Sawyer is faced with someone who works at the hospital who she swears is her stalker. You as the audience have never met the stalker at this point, so you don't know if it's true or not. So all you can go off of is thinking whether or not she really belongs there. One of the most interesting little facts about this film is that the entire thing is filmed on an iPhone 7 Plus. That by itself got me interested in it at the time, but it's the story I stuck around for. Another one coming out of Australia, Beaten to Death from 2022. I discovered this independent film recently, and I don't know many people who have talked about it. It kicks off with Jack, who's being assaulted by some big biker-looking dude, who he eventually gets the better of and escapes. He tries to find help, but he just keeps hitting roadblocks as he deals with navigating the middle of nowhere Ireland, backroad hillbilly psychos, and being blind, all to try to make it home alive. It's close to being one of those single-actor performance films, but it has its share of other background characters for the story. This just came out of nowhere on me, and I really did find it to be an awesome film. If you can find it, I recommend giving it a shot. The next couple entries are all about houses. First, The Legend of Hell House from 1973. I know I'm bringing it back really old, but this is based on a tremendous novel by Richard Matheson, the same author who wrote I Am Legend and What Dreams May Come. It is the only adaptation of this book. I say tremendous because I've read the novel a few dozen times. It is a favorite of mine, and sort of upsetting to consider there's only ever been one film adaptation attempted. It tells the story of a group of paranormal researchers who want to study the infamous Belasco Mansion, home of the late Emmerich Belasco, and considered to be the Mount Everest of haunted houses. The team is made up of a physicist looking to prove the existence of paranormal activity as a form of energy that can be scientifically measured. Then his wife, then a spiritualist meant to help make the connection with the spirit world, and then a medium who was part of the team meant to study the house prior to this team. He was the only survivor of the previous group, and he's traumatized by the events that took place. The medium is there to help them understand the haunting better because he has studied Belasco's history thoroughly.
He was 6'5". They called him the Roaring Giant.
What did he do to make this house so evil, Mr. Fisher?
Drug addiction, alcoholism, sadism, bestiality, mutilation, murder, vampirism, necrophilia, cannibalism, not to mention a gamut of sexual goodies. Shall I go on?
It is a film where the screenplay was adapted by Matheson himself, so he had a lot to say in the interpretation the film would take. There are a lot of aspects the film could not touch from its novel form. It is a tough novel to create a film for, which is probably why only this version exists so far. But I think someone will give it a chance one day. This film, however, definitely has its 70s feel to it, but it is a great horror movie despite the novel being 1,000 times better. Now I want to talk about Silent House from 2011. Before Elizabeth Olsen became the face of the Scarlet Witch for the MCU, she had a lot under her belt. Her first feature film is 2011's Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. Then in 2012, she pops up in 4 separate films. Red Lights, Liberal Arts, Peace, Love, and Understanding, and Silent House, a psychological horror movie portrayed as being filmed in one single continuous shot. The same effect you can see in certain movies or TV shows as just scenes, but it isn't an original American idea. It's one of those horror films that's Americanized from overseas. We remade it after the 2010 original film from Uruguay, La Casa Muda, or The Silent House. Olsen portrays the character of Sarah, who is visiting some family property with her father and uncle to clear it out when they are attacked by unknown men. Sarah is left to navigate the dark house without making any noise and avoid being seen by the attackers in order to save her own life. It feels like most forget about this film because after this, she gets Old Boy, then Godzilla, then Avengers, and her career takes off from there. So most don't remember her early days that much. But this is a good reason to go back and see something she did pre-MCU and watch a good horror movie at the same time. While you're at it, try to find the original because it's just as good. Now let's go with a French film, The Deep House from 2021. It's part found footage and part, well, not found footage. Following a couple trying to make it big as content creators, they explore abandoned and seemingly haunted locations. While traveling, they are told about a unique site that few know about, a haunted house at the bottom of a lake. Intrigued, the couple go to explore it, and of course it proves to actually be haunted. This concept is awesome because telling a haunted house story is easy. Putting the haunted house underwater just feels like the next step to take. It's not as epic as, say, Event Horizon, a haunted spaceship in the middle of nowhere, but it's still unnerving as the main focus is not just their survival in the house, it's also the fact that their oxygen is running low. So if the house doesn't get them, a lack of air is gonna. It misses a few moments that would have sent it over, which might have been due to budget constraints, but whatever they had at their disposal, they definitely delivered. Now for the last house on this list, I have The Night House from 2020. Rebecca Hall was first put on my radar with The Awakening from 2011, which by itself is a great thriller. And I haven't seen her pop up in anything that I didn't think was a good movie. Most of the time, she is in more supporting roles, like Transcendence or Godzilla vs. Kong. The few leading roles she has, though, cannot be shied away from. Like this horror film from 2020. She plays Beth, a grieving widow who lost her husband after he committed suicide. She is left with a cryptic note from him that sends her on a path of discovery, trying to unfold why her husband did this and what he was hiding. She then discovers a house he built across the lake from where they live, mirroring their actual house. This begs more questions as she continues to try and figure out what was really happening to her husband in his final days. It is a wild ride with a mystery wrapped up in a bunch of supernatural elements, where the atmosphere is set up perfectly for each twist the story takes. I can't picture anyone but Rebecca Hall making this movie what it is, and it is truly one of her best films, though it feels like not many have heard of it, which is sad and more people should watch this movie. Now I might get a lot of guff for this choice, but I stand by it. As Above, So Below from 2014. Those used to my content know I love found footage films, and I lean more towards the positive aspect of this film's mixed reviews. While most say it falls into a found footage wormhole of cliches that a lot of these films have, you need to be someone who loves this style to have an appreciation for it. At least that's my perspective. It's about a group trying to document the haunted catacombs under Paris when they get stuck in a trap that tells them they have to go deeper. Finding their way basically sends them through a maze of hellish tunnels as they attempt to find their way out. It is loosely based on Dante's Divine Comedy, as the curse they break by defiling a tomb sends them through a representation of the 9 rings of hell. Again, if you love found footage, it's for you. If not, maybe give it a chance if you're up to it, but I will always say how good this movie is. Let's keep it going with Don't Look at the Demon from 2022. It stars Fiona Dourif, daughter of Brad Dourif, who, if you don't know, is the voice of Chucky from the Child's Play franchise. It also stars Harris Dickinson, who I brought up in my video about the Iron Claw. Maybe that's how this popped up on my radar, I don't know, but I'm not fully sure how I found this. But I gave it a chance, and it was definitely worth it. In the light of films that use the concept of reality TV for its plot device, Fiona plays Jules, a medium who can sense spirits, and she takes her team to Asia to film some spooky happenings for their show. Of course, they find a house that is too much for her to handle, and things go pretty awry pretty quickly. And I mean quickly. This film wastes no time getting straight to the point. I'm talking 5 minutes, maybe, of stage setting for what's gonna happen, and then boom, they get to the house, and then bam, shit starts going down. Literally that fast, and it just keeps going. It's sort of like if Grave Encounters and Stir of Echoes had a love child. This would be that movie. Moving on to Alone from 2020. Now this one I definitely got from either TikTok or Instagram, maybe even Shorts. I can't recall exactly, but it's one of those movie clips that sometimes pops up on your feed. I get those a lot because everything is movie related for me. But I saw the clip and I was intrigued, so I found the movie. Jessica is moving from her city apartment somewhere we never really get to know, because in her travels she crosses paths with a man who keeps creepily showing up wherever she is. Then the man kidnaps her and locks her in a basement of a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Luckily she escapes, but now has to terrain the wilderness of an area she doesn't know. And this guy is not letting up either. It's very anxiety written. The entire thing start to finish just keeps your butthole really tight. You know what I mean? It's not a unique concept at all. It's just done differently and with enough flair to make it unique that it's worth it in the end. It's reviewed great and is more of a thriller, but it's still something to try for this time of year. This next one has a little bit of an interesting background. Malum from 2023. It's a remake of a film I had on last year's list called Last Shift from 2014. Both directed, written, and produced by Scott Poyley and Anthony DeBlasi. The first was an indie film, only premiering at the London Fright Fest Film Festival and then going out to streaming. But it's racked up tremendous ratings, so it stands very much on its own 2 feet. Why they remade it? Well, it still has great ratings, but most say it doesn't live up to its predecessor. I slightly disagree on one front. The story is about a rookie cop having their first shift be the graveyard shift of the last night of a closed precinct until everything is moved into the new one. They are left alone when weird things start happening as the rookie discovers there is something sinister lurking in the abandoned building. That's the simplest form of what these movies are about, and the original sticks with that. As far as the remake, it sort of flushes out the story a bit more. It adds more dynamic to the characters, gets them more involved, has more backstory, while also adding more characters to begin with. There is definitely a push in the graphical content as well. The special effects are a lot better, something the first might have been missing, but that was probably due to budget constraints. It was an indie film after all. There is just more to the film itself than just being a remake. It's a more well thought out approach to the foundation of what that original film built. I do have my hat more in the ring for the original, simply because I was not a big fan of the lead of this version. She just feels wrong for this part, because scenes where there should be solid emotional reaction, she sort of just deadpans it and starts breathing heavy. She gets better in Act 3, but it was hard to invest in her in my opinion. It's still worth it because it's definitely got its upgrade from the original. The final Netflix original, Cam from 2018. It starts off slow but gradually gets more and more uncomfortable. It's not scary, it's just unsettling to consider the idea. A webcam girl trying to up her ranking suddenly has her identity stolen. She has no idea what is happening, but she just starts going live on her stream in her own house while she's there, and it's not her. She then does whatever she can to try and figure out how to find who is this imposter, and there's a bit of a supernatural element hidden in the story, but they don't really explore it that much. However, that also leaves a bit of an ominous tone for the whole thing, and the entire third act takes a weird turn in the plot to bring it all the way around. This pops up on some of the other lists I've seen before, but I've never spoken about it, so I wanted to give it its due. Also, Jessica Parker Kennedy is in it for about 90 seconds. That's the actress who played Max in the hit series Black Sails on Starz. Legitimately 90 seconds. She's in 2 scenes. Doesn't even play the biggest role in the story, but there she is. Okay, this next one might be a bit of a hard sell, but hear me out. Backtrack from 2015. Adrian Brody is the type of actor that doesn't fit the mold. He becomes the mold. He is able to embody any role he takes, and Backtrack, despite poor reviews, is right up there with the rest of them. He plays Peter Bauer, a psychotherapist who is struggling after he and his wife lost their daughter in an accident. Peter blames himself and suffers from nightmares and depression while still trying to occupy his time with his work. One night, he is visited by a mysterious young girl who he only gets her name and a number she writes down. He investigates the girl and discovers she was murdered almost 30 years before. So the mysterious girl visiting him turns out to be a spirit that would lead him to the road of discovering something sinister from his own past. There are just so many twists this story takes, and you almost don't see them coming. I'm not sure what happened that got most people to feel like this was a typical or cliche ghost story, and for some reason, because it's that, it's bad. This is just a great example of how no matter how often these tropes might be used, it can be done right or done wrong, and this is one of the right ways. Now, this is the only film I'm using from 2024, Lowlifes. There have been some really good horror movies this year, but I feel like this one is deserving of a little spotlight. This slasher film about a family on a road trip getting tied up with some backroads hillbillies feels like a movie you've seen before, but I guarantee you it's not. There is one initial twist that once it happens, you'll never be able to predict what the next thing is. Some of it's a bit annoying, like that typical yelling at the screen because someone is doing something stupid, but I think that also makes for a good horror movie sometimes. This is definitely a great sleeper agent for the year, and it's on Tubi, so it's easy to find. Now for a Hulu original, Clock from 2023. This psychological horror film is a feature-length version of a short film of the same name by Alexis Jacknow. It's her directorial debut, and she's done a wonderful job with this story. This might have been big last year with the Hulu crowd, but I took a chance on it randomly, and I was not mad about it. A woman feels pressure from her family and friends to start a family of her own, but she's very career-driven and has never wanted kids. Despite that, it also comes off that she sort of fears the idea of being pregnant. But she loves her husband and decides to try to change for him. She takes part in a risky trial to help get her body and mind ready for pregnancy. What she takes away from the trial is 2 things. She has to start taking a bunch of pills, and she had to go through a procedure that puts this little device in her body to help move it along. After the trial, she starts hallucinating, feeling like she's being haunted, and starts to act extremely weird. That is a lot of the story for you, but I can't explain it any better and not give any more of it away. There are twists that this story takes that are just perfect, and the director had made some great choices with things like color grading to trick your eyes and your mind, and it's just scary, and it's unsettling, and it's sometimes uncomfortable. A little bit of everything for a good horror movie. Going back to 2015 with The Blackcoat's Daughter. A lot of people might be talking about this film now because of writer-director Osgood Perkins, who recently hit it big with his film Longlegs from July of this year. He also directed the Gretel and Hansel film from 2020, which I wasn't a big fan of. But this is his directorial debut, and it's a shame it took another movie to sort of bring people back to it. Myself included. 2 teenage girls are stuck at their boarding school waiting to be picked up by their parents. One of the girls is a freshman and is rather awkward in speaking about why her parents are late. Nothing is certain, but it is assumed that either they are dead or don't want anything to do with her, which adds to her demeanor as sort of shy and drawn in. The senior is meant to be watching her, but instead goes out and upon her return finds her bowing in front of the furnace in the basement. The film is described as having 3 separate timelines that lead to the climax. There is a good and a bad to this movie. The bad is that it's slow, but the good is that the tone is very unnerving and the slowness is part of that. There is almost a lack of tension building devices, which actually creates more tension. And this was a film that did one festival, got picked up by A24, and then went straight to streaming here in the States. You could find it on Netflix overseas, but it went by the name February, which might have caused it to fall short, since nobody could find it by that name. It's a very different film, and if you appreciated long likes, you should go back to see where this director started to appreciate his growth. And last but not least, Eden Lake from 2008. This might be the most obvious film on this list, especially to a lot of the huge horror movie fans, because this film continues to get spoken about in many circles since its release, and it still pops up in various lists and videos. It's definitely the pinnacle of lesser-known horror flicks that fly under the radar. It's a word-of-mouth sort of film, where you'd only come across it from someone who has seen it to tell you, or if you went digging for those articles or videos, like this one. A couple spend a quiet afternoon at a lake that's basically in the middle of nowhere. Their relaxation is disturbed by some backroads teenagers who start to terrorize them, and it's all downhill from there. This film has one of the best ending twists for a movie of this nature, and I don't think I've come across an ending that was so agonizing to witness. It stars Kelly Reilly and Michael Fassbender, and it's written and directed by James Watkins, the same guy who directed the American version of The Woman in Black with Daniel Radcliffe, and he's the writer-director of the recent James McAvoy film Speak No Evil. Even if you heard of it before, this movie deserves to be on this list and any other it gets put on. Well, there you have it. You big horror movie buffs might know a bunch of these, but hopefully I was able to get you with 1 or 2 of them. Most of these I find through recommendation, or just giving something different a shot for one reason or another. Not all of these are your normal mainstream direct-to-theater films. The B-level, video-on-demand, low-budget films that deserve a little attention are sometimes worth it. Even on this list, there might have been some that had theater runs, but they lie mostly forgotten about and should be given a chance, and maybe now it'll get it. If you can think of a film that should be here, make sure to check out the first one I did from last year. I want to keep this a yearly video trend, but I will never repeat a movie. So if you think I left it out, just check that one out first. And if you can think of another one that isn't on either of them, I'd love to hear it. I can't watch everything, so of course there will be plenty of examples, and I look forward to seeing what you have in the comments. I gotta get ready for next year too, you know? But I do hope you find something here you didn't know about and that you add it to your watch list as well. Happy Halloween season, everybody. Cheers.